Hi, I'm Matilda. On Christmas, my parents handed me a gift in front of everyone, a stainless steel dog bowl with my name on it. They all laughed. I smiled too, but that was the last time I did. 3 days later, they got an eviction notice in the mail. What happened in between? Well, it wasn't just the bowl. It was everything leading up to it. The silence, the erasure, the way they made me feel like a ghost in my own family. 3 nights before Christmas, I got a text from my mother at 11:08 p.m. Not a call, not even a voicemail. A text. Dinner starts at 6. Don't be late this time. No, how are you? No, hope you're coming. Just an order stamped with impatience. Like I was late to some meeting she didn't want to schedule in the first place. I stared at the message, lying there in bed in my small apartment on the south side of Austin, and felt a familiar thud in my chest. That dull throb of being expected but never wanted. I didn't respond. Just set the phone down beside me and let the quiet press in. 3 days later, I drove the 3 hours to San Antonio. It was Christmas night. The streets were nearly empty except for a few other cars with trunks full of wrapped gifts and drivers rehearsing polite smiles. I pulled into the same driveway I had walked up for over 3 decades. It looked the same. Too many lights on the front porch, an inflatable Santa sagging from one side, and a wreath so big it covered half the doorbell. My father never knew how to decorate with restraint. No one came to greet me, not even Max, the family's golden retriever. I let myself in, brushing the chill off my coat, and walked straight into the hum of laughter, clinking glasses, and oven heat thick with cinnamon and wine. "There you are," my mother said, glancing over her shoulder as she poured a drink for a guest. Then she turned away. That was it. Meanwhile, Max barked happily as my sister Marjorie scooped him up in her arms, cooing, "There's my handsome boy." He got kisses, belly rubs, and even a special biscuit. I got a quick glance and a turned back. No one asked where I'd been. No one offered to take my coat. The Christmas card framed in the hallway had a group shot of everyone from Thanksgiving, except me. A snowflake banner dangled above it, and on the entry table was a festive chalkboard that read, "Welcome home, family." Underneath it, in glitter marker, were the names Walter, Marjorie, Max, not mine. Dinner passed like it always did. Loud voices talking over one another. My father telling the same story he always told about driving to Big Bend in the 80s. Marjorie showing off her new internship with some media company in LA. Walter's fiancée bragging about her Peloton milestones. Nobody asked me anything. I sipped water, ate slowly, pretended my silence was preference, not exclusion. Then came the gifts. We were all gathered in the living room, fire on, jazz Christmas covers playing low. Each person took turns opening something, like a rehearsed pageant. Walter opened a set of golf clubs from Dad. Marjorie unwrapped a designer handbag from Mom. Even Max had a new plush toy shaped like a champagne bottle. Then came my turn. "Here, Maddie," my mom said, reaching behind the tree. She handed me a small box. It was light, barely the weight of a paperback. I unwrapped it slowly, careful with the ribbon, thinking maybe this year they'd remember I liked books, maybe a gift card to that tiny bookstore near my place, maybe just anything thoughtful. But when the paper fell away, what stared back at me was stainless steel. A dog bowl, polished, heavy, engraved with the word, Maddie. For a moment no one said anything. Then Marjorie burst out laughing. "Oh my God, you actually did it!" She giggled, clutching her side. My father smirked. "Well, at least Max is family, right?" Someone coughed to cover a chuckle. Another took a sip of wine too loudly. I just looked at the bowl in my lap, the name etched in block letters like some sick joke. I looked at it so hard my eyes blurred, but I refused to blink. "Wait," Marjorie said, wiping tears from her eyes. "We figured Max shouldn't be the only one without a dish." She looked proud, triumphant even. I nodded once, put the bowl back in its box, closed the lid, and smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't angry. Just a sliver of something cold. "Thank you," I said. Then I stood up, walked into the kitchen, refilled my glass with wine I brought myself. No one followed. I stood at the counter, staring out the window into the backyard I used to run around in barefoot. The patio lights were flickering. A wind chime sang in the dark. No one noticed I was gone, No one cared. But I did. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a joke. It was a message, and I'd been hearing it all my life. They handed me chips and soda like I was 12 and happy just to be included. It wasn't a joke. It never was. A week before Christmas, a group text lit up my phone while I was heating leftovers. Mom titled it, Holiday Meal Plans. No greeting, just a list. Marjorie got the roast turkey. Of course she did. She knows her way around a kitchen, Carmela added, as if anyone ever questioned it. Elroy, the golden son, was in charge of wine. That imported stuff you brought last year was a hit. My mom would handle dessert and decor naturally. Then came mine. Maddie, just grab chips and soda, nothing fancy. Marjorie chimed in seconds later. Yeah, you're chill and low maintenance. It fits. Fits. Like I was a puzzle piece tossed in after the picture was already formed. I stared at my screen until the backlight dimmed. I didn't reply. Didn't ask if they wanted any specific flavors. I knew it didn't matter. They'd already decided I wasn't a main ingredient. Just filler. Christmas night, when I walked into the dining room, the table was glowing under that ridiculous crystal chandelier. Candles lit, fancy folded napkins, real silverware, gold-rimmed plates. My mother's idea of class. Every chair was filled. Walter and his fiancée Marjorie and her on-again boyfriend, my aunt and uncle from Dallas. Even Max had a cushion by the fire. There was no place left for me. Oh, Carmela said flatly, looking up from pouring champagne. We figured you'd want to sit near Max. She nodded toward the side coffee table. It had a paper napkin and a flimsy plastic cup already placed on it. Walter chuckled. He misses you when you're not around. The only open seat was a bar stool with one wobbly leg. I set my bag of chips on the side table, next to the soda I had picked up earlier. Store brand, like they'd asked. It was the kind you grab last minute because you know no one will notice. I sat down slowly, balanced myself, said nothing. Dinner went on like it always did, like I wasn't there. I heard about everyone's new ventures, Marjorie's YouTube channel gaining traction, Elroy's girlfriend possibly pregnant, my dad's latest renovation project. No one asked about my work. No one mentioned the art class I'd started teaching. Not even when Marjorie showed a slideshow of her trip to Colorado and skipped right past the photo I knew I had taken. I looked at my plastic cup. It had started to sweat, tiny droplets trailing down onto the flimsy napkin. I picked it up and held it for a moment, just so it wouldn't stain the table. I remembered another gathering years ago, my cousin's graduation. The cake said, "Congrats Sarah, Elroy, and MJ was me." No one knew. They thought it was some family friend. I didn't correct them. Then there was Marjorie's baby shower. I'd shown up early to help set up, brought balloons and cupcakes. When the introductions came around, Carmela forgot to mention me. "Oh, this is Maddie," she'd said, like I was someone's plus one. I didn't cry that day either. I watched the room. Laughter bounced from wall to wall, skipping over me like I was furniture. And yet, none of it was surprising. Not anymore. That realization didn't sting, not like it used to. It was something colder, duller, a slow, sinking awareness that this wasn't a rough night or a one-off mistake. It was structure, routine, a system I'd been slotted into long before I had the words to describe it. I ate in silence, my back to them, chewing quietly so no one would notice I was still there. When dessert came out, coconut cream pie, Carmela's favorite, Max got the first bite. They let him lick the whipped cream straight off the fork. No one asked if I wanted a slice. I stared at the fireplace, letting the orange glow blur my vision. Maybe if I stayed still enough, they'd forget I existed altogether. And a part of me hoped they would. Because when people exclude you long enough, you stop hoping for space and start shrinking yourself to fit into theirs. I stayed seated long after the plates were cleared, the laughter fading into the clatter of dishes and the hum of reruns from the living room TV. The pie was gone. So were the polite conversations. And still, no one asked me anything. Not even if I'd made it home all right the night I got caught in a thunderstorm driving back from a funeral. No one even seemed to remember I'd gone. I slowly stood up, stretched my legs, and made my way to the hallway to get a bit of air. The walls were lined with the same family photos from years past, some faded, some updated, But the one thing they all had in common? I wasn't in any of them. As I walked back toward the living room, Marjorie clapped her hands like a kindergarten teacher calling for attention. Okay, before anyone passes out from too much sugar, I've got a little surprise. She pulled out her phone and connected it to the smart TV. The screen lit up with a video file titled Holiday Memories. Carmela beamed. Oh, this is going to be so sweet. I sat back down, legs crossed, arms folded tight. The video started with old clips, grainy footage of snowball fights, unwrapping gifts under the tree, dancing in pajamas. The room filled with soft music and chuckles as Marjorie narrated over some parts. There's Elroy with his first bike, she laughed. And here's us playing that board game Dad always cheated at. Laughter, memories, nostalgia. But as each scene played, I waited, watched closely. Where was I? Clip after clip went by. 10, maybe 15 minutes, and still, no sign of me. Not even the back of my head. Not my voice. Not a mention. Even Max had a montage. Him wearing Santa hats, stealing cookies, napping beside the fireplace. And me? Nothing. No one seemed to notice. No one turned to ask, hey, wasn't Maddie there that year? Or, didn't she take that photo? Not a single word, like I'd been edited out on purpose. When the video ended, everyone applauded. Someone wiped a tear. I sat perfectly still. That wasn't an accident. After a moment, I stood and stepped into the foyer. I wasn't thinking, just moving, like muscle memory. I reached for my coat, but my hand stopped over a small stack of envelopes on the entry table, red and green, lined in gold. I picked one up. It was a holiday card. The Whitakers wish you joy. And inside was a glossy photo collage. Carmela and Walter with Max on their laps, Marjorie with her twins in matching sweaters, Elroy and his girlfriend holding hands under mistletoe. Underneath, Love, Walter, Carmela, Marjorie, Elroy, Max. That was it. Not even a Matilda in smaller print. I stared at it, letting the cheap perfume of the paper coating seep into my nose. Then I flipped through the rest of the stack. Dozens of cards, each stamped and ready, my name missing from every single one. I put them back, slowly, like laying flowers at a grave. Back in the hallway, I leaned against the wall and breathed in. 1, 2, 3. This wasn't about forgetting. Forgetting is when your name slips their mind during a phone call. Forgetting is leaving you out of one group photo, or missing your birthday by a day. This was design. I thought about all the ways I'd made myself smaller, skipping events so they wouldn't have to squeeze me into carpool, not correcting them when they got the name of my job wrong, staying quiet when they joked about how Maddie always does her own thing. But it wasn't a joke, was it? It was the expectation that I'd play along, laugh at myself, take up less space, and accept what I was given. Not anymore. Because there's a difference between being left out and being erased. And tonight, I finally saw the full picture. They didn't just forget me. They wanted to forget me. And now, I think I'm ready to let them. I stayed in the foyer a few seconds longer than I meant to. The warmth from the living room hadn't reached this part of the house. It was colder here, quieter, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stood still, listening to the hum of voices drifting from the kitchen. That's when I heard it. I hadn't planned to eavesdrop. I was on my way to get a glass of water. But Marjorie's voice sliced through the air before I could move another step. At least the dog got a bowl. She should be grateful for that. There was a pause, then Walter's chuckle. She never did know how to take a joke. They were just behind the pantry door. It wasn't even fully closed. They didn't bother to whisper, not really. It wasn't secrecy, it was dismissal. They talked about me like I wasn't in the house, like I wasn't still breathing under their roof. I didn't flinch. I didn't storm off. I stood there, motionless, until I heard footsteps move toward the sink and water running, safe enough to slip away unnoticed. But I wasn't unnoticed. I was invisible. I walked back into the dining room, grabbed my empty wine glass, and headed into the kitchen. The others had cleared out by then. Someone had turned on a football game in the den, and the TV was competing with Marjorie's laughter. I rinsed my glass, turned off the faucet. That's when I saw it, half buried under Carmela's pile of printed recipes, a paper crumpled and shoved aside like trash. It was an email, a confirmation receipt. Subject line, Bowl engraving confirmed gift for Maddie, as discussed. I scanned it once, twice. The product description matched the box I had opened earlier. Stainless steel, bone-shaped engraving. Maddie. There were no apologies, no playful disclaimers like hope this doesn't offend her or just a silly gag. Just confirmation. Payment processed, shipping address confirmed, and Carmela's name on the billing line. So it wasn't Marjorie's idea alone. It was group sanctioned. My mother had agreed, paid for it, called it a gift. I folded the paper in half, then again, tucked it into my coat pocket like it was evidence. Because in a way, it was. I didn't feel rage. Not then. Rage takes energy. I felt something closer to ice. I made my way to the guest bathroom. The mirror above the sink was too clean, too bright. I leaned in. My eyeliner had smudged under my eyes, giving me a bruised look. My hair was frizzing from the dry air, but I didn't look broken, just alert. I washed my hands slowly, dried them with the towel Carmela had embroidered, "Bless this mess" on. I looked at my own face, as if I were someone else, someone I had just met. You heard it. You saw it. Now decide what to do with it. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because there was nothing left to mourn in that moment. The grief had already passed through. Now came something else, not revenge, not yet, but the idea of a line, finely drawn. I left the bathroom, passed by the hallway photo frames again. Still no me. Just smiling faces lined up like ornaments, each one posed perfectly, curated. I rejoined the others, sat quietly near the back of the room, watching as Carmela refilled wine glasses and Marjorie handed out second servings of pie. No one noticed I was back, and I didn't offer a single word. Let them think I was done. I had only just begun. I stayed in the foyer a few seconds longer than I meant to. The warmth from the living room hadn't reached this part of the house. It was colder here, quieter, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. From across the entryway, the tree twinkled in golds and reds. A few stray ribbons hung loosely on branches, and one ornament had tilted from its hook, a ceramic angel with a chipped wing. I glanced under the tree where the remaining gifts were piled. Something was wrong. My package, the one I had wrapped the night before in my apartment, with brown craft paper and the gold ribbon I'd ironed flat with my straightener, wasn't there. I bent slightly, scanning the gift tags. There it was. At least the paper and the ribbon were mine, but the tag said, "To Mom and Dad, from Marjorie." I reached for it. There was a small tear on one corner, a spot I had taped carefully. My hands had done that, my effort, my choice, and now it had someone else's name on it. The box was opened a few minutes later in the middle of the living room. Carmela peeled the paper slowly, savoring the moment. When she saw the vintage cookbook, Southern Comfort Kitchen, first edition, 1972, she gasped and pressed a hand to her chest. "Oh my Lord, Marjorie, this is beautiful. Where on earth did you find it?" Marjorie beamed, her teeth like polished porcelain. "I stumbled across it at a rare book fair last month. Thought of you right away." I stood behind the armchair, silent. Walter nodded, approving. "That's a thoughtful gift. Real sentimental." No one turned toward me, not even a glance. The effort, the planning, the time I'd spent looking for that cookbook on 3 separate weekends? Gone. Just like the name on the tag. I felt my coat sleeve between my fingers, soft wool still holding the chill from earlier that evening. I reached for it. Max wagged his tail, tongue lolling, stationed near the tree like some goofy sentinel. I looked down at him. "At least you saw me," I murmured. And then I turned toward the front door. My hand closed around the brass knob. It felt colder than before. Maybe it was just me. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make a scene. No slammed doors, no sarcastic comments, no tears. Just footsteps on hardwood, a muted click, and the quiet winter night on the other side. The air outside tasted like pine and frost. The sky was deep navy, stars barely peeking through the clouds. I didn't rush down the walkway. I didn't need to. Each step felt deliberate, not heavy, but anchored. As I walked to my car, parked halfway down the block, thanks to Marjorie's guests taking all the driveway spots, I thought about how this would look to them. If they noticed at all. They wouldn't see the coat missing from the rack or the shoes gone from the mat. They wouldn't hear the silence where a thank you should have been. They'd carry on, passing around leftovers and laughs, never once stopping to ask where I went. And that, I realized, was the final proof. Not only had they replaced my gift, they had replaced my place. I drove home in near silence. No music, just the rhythmic hum of the tires on cold asphalt. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, even as the emotion pooled somewhere deeper than tears could reach. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. Across the street, someone's Christmas lights blinked in sync with a plastic snowman bobbing in the wind. The keys in my hand felt sharper now. Not physically, just in meaning. I held them tighter than I needed to. Back in my apartment, I unwrapped the scarf from my neck and hung my coat carefully on the hook. My place smelled like cinnamon and coffee from the candle I'd left burning before I left. The silence here was different. It didn't ignore me. It welcomed me. I walked into the kitchen, made tea, and sat by the window with the mug between my palms. Steam curled up into the dim light like breath from something alive. I didn't text anyone. I didn't post anything. They didn't notice I left. But they would notice what left with me. The scent of cinnamon still lingered in my apartment the next morning. I had left the candle burning low through the night. Accidentally or intentionally, I'm not sure. Maybe I needed something warm to stand guard while I slept. I woke early, far earlier than usual. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll for updates or photos. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapped my cardigan tight, and listened. There was nothing but the hum of the heater and the faint clicks of old pipes stretching through the building. That quiet was honest. 3 days slipped by. I spent them like someone living in a different season, running errands, organizing the closet, walking aimlessly past holiday decorations that didn't feel mine. I never checked in with anyone, and not one person from the house checked in with me. Then, that morning, the 6th day of Christmas, ironically, I imagined the mailbox at my parents' house, the blue tin box bolted to their brick column, and I knew it had arrived. The letter would be thick, heavy even, not because of paper, but because of what it carried, the beginning of something they never saw coming. Inside it, bold type, my name. Not as sender, not as resident, not as daughter, but as former guarantor. A signature withdrawn, a safety net removed. 3 years ago, they begged me to co-sign, told me it was temporary, said I was the only one they could count on. I was raised to think that meant love. Now, I knew better. It meant usefulness. Walter would have opened it first. He always beat Carmela to the mail. He'd recognize the bank name immediately. His fingers would tremble slightly, because he always assumed the worst. But even then, he'd never imagine it was real. Carmela would read over his shoulder. Her face would tighten, not from shock, but from insult. She'd see my signature, right next to the stamp voiding it, and take it personally. How dare she? The irony. That afternoon, they'd scramble. They'd call Marjorie, who would immediately say, "She's probably just confused. You know how Maddie is." Then Elroy. He'd say less, but not out of kindness. Just strategy. Always calculating, that one. Carmela would try to call me. She'd think her tone could still work, that I'd pick up if she used that soft voice, the one reserved for guests and realtors. I didn't answer. Not the first time, not the second. Instead, I sent an email. Short. Attached was a PDF, scanned, notarized, legally binding. Withdrawal of financial co-responsibility, dated nearly a month prior to Christmas. There it was in black and white. No more signature, no more obligations. No more me, no text, no explanations, no room for argument. They had always taught me that family meant sacrifice, but they'd never bothered to ask who was always doing the sacrificing. That night, I pulled a throw blanket over my knees and sat with a book open in my lap. I wasn't reading. I was thinking. A memory unfolded, quiet but sharp. 2 months earlier, sitting across from a loan officer in a small, impersonal bank office. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. The man looked at the documents, then at me. "Are you sure?" he'd asked. I nodded. I'm sure. He was young, maybe early 30s, too polite to say it outright, but his eyes said it for him. Why now? They'll be fine, I told him, until they're not, and when that happens, I won't be the one holding the rope. He didn't respond, just stamped, signed, and filed. That was the moment I stopped apologizing for the boundaries I needed. And now, days later, I could feel that moment pulsing in the real world, at that house, at that table, in that kitchen where no one offered me pie. I imagined them sitting in the living room, the letter spread out like a warning. Walter pacing, Carmela dialing the same number over and over, disbelief turning to outrage. I didn't smile. There was nothing joyful about it, but I didn't regret it either. Because choosing peace for yourself isn't cruel. Letting people weaponize your silence is. I had said nothing on Christmas, left quietly, walked away without making a scene. But now my absence was the loudest thing in their house. I wondered if they'd finally add me to the family video now. If not out of love, then out of fear. Because without me, the foundation cracked, and they knew it. They wanted me invisible, until they needed saving. This time, I chose to be gone. The text came just after sunrise. I was in the middle of making coffee, one slipper on, one off, when the screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another auto alert or a spammer selling insurance I didn't need. But something made me pause. Maybe intuition. Maybe the fact that nothing in my life lately had come without warning signs dressed in silence. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and tapped it open. Matilda, it's Daniel. That stopped me. The last time I heard his voice, we were arguing in my car. I was crying. He was telling me that I had walls thicker than any prison. He left that night and never came back. Now, 2 years of silence gone in a sentence. I need to tell you something, the next message read. Your mom reached out to me. I sat down on the kitchen stool slowly, heart thudding. Not from affection, not from nostalgia, but something colder. Anticipation. Dread. The missing piece you didn't want but knew was coming. She called before Christmas, said she was worried about you, asked if I'd noticed anything off, like if you'd pushed me away for a reason, said she was trying to understand what made you so distant with family. My stomach clenched. That wasn't concern, that was reconnaissance. She made me feel like I needed to protect you, he added. From yourself. I stared at the screen, fingers tightening around the mug still warm in my hand. The same woman who couldn't bother to include me in a family photo had picked up the phone to dig through my past. She had reached into the wreckage of a relationship she never even acknowledged when I was in it, and now she wanted to frame it like a symptom, like I was the broken thing that kept others away. And Daniel, God help him, played along. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't explode through the screen. Instead, I stood up, walked to the living room, tried to breathe. The next hit didn't wait long. That evening, a friend from college, Lauren, called after seeing something on social media, a New Year's party photo, a video actually. She wasn't even there, Lauren told me, voice sharp with secondhand anger. But someone brought you up in a group chat. One of Marjorie's friends said, "Isn't she the one who eats from a dog bowl now?" I closed my eyes. She didn't say anything? I asked. She laughed, Lauren whispered. They all did. Your mother was in the background. She didn't stop them either. The room around me stayed quiet, but something in me shattered. Not loud, not theatrical, just a break that didn't need sound to be real. It wasn't just betrayal, it was precision. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted the version of me that left to be laughable. They wanted to reshape my absence into something they could point at, mock, reduce, a punchline at parties, a whispered warning in old relationships. Don't end up like her. I closed the call. Didn't respond to Lauren's apologies, though I knew she meant them. I just sat there, staring out at the dim skyline, buildings holding their shape while I tried to keep mine. Eventually I got up, walked over to the bookshelf, pulled down an old gray folder I hadn't touched in months. Inside were copies of signed agreements, property tax receipts, emails confirming loan payments I made, credit statements with my name at the top. Everything they thought they could erase me from. This was proof I was once their backbone. I scanned through page after page, eyes dry. Then I opened my laptop and started uploading them into a secure drive I labeled simply, "Just in case." They wanted to destroy what was left of my name. Maybe it was time they lost theirs. I wasn't raised to destroy, but they built me for war. The message came through while I was sorting laundry, mundane, rhythmic, a task that grounded me after everything. It was a forwarded photo from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. No caption, just the image. It was their living room. The same living room where we'd open presents every Christmas. The mantel was decorated in gold garland, stockings hung in descending order of age. In the center, perched above the fireplace, was a new family photo in a wooden frame. They were all there. Marjorie with her 2 sons, Elroy and his fiancée, Walter and Carmela, sitting with matching Santa mugs. And Max, front and center, wearing the scarf I left behind. My spot, the far right corner where I'd stood every year, was gone. Not just cropped, not left empty, replaced. I stared at that photo longer than I should have, not out of sadness anymore, but because I couldn't decide what stung more. The fact that I wasn't missed, or the fact that Max was apparently the better visual fit. There's something profoundly strange about watching your own erasure be commemorated and framed like an achievement. It wasn't just a statement, it was a celebration. I saved the photo to my phone. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to my desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and took out a manila folder I hadn't touched in months. I had kept it not out of spite, but because some part of me had always known. It held more than documents. It held memory no one could rewrite. I spread everything across the desk: property tax bills with my payment records, emails with the bank confirming the mortgage adjustment, a scanned letter from their attorney, one they'd sent me in panic 3 years ago, begging for help, and the invoice from the electrician, paid in full under my name, when the power nearly got cut in the middle of winter. All in my handwriting, all signed, all filed. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had buried what I had done, hidden the fact that I was the reason the house stood at all. The irony wasn't lost on me, especially not now, knowing they were standing on a foundation I had secured while hanging stockings for a dog in my scarf. I typed a single-page document. It was simple, factual, unapologetic. The foundation held because of me. It crumbles without me. Signed, Matilda. I printed it, slipped it into an envelope with no return address, and drove to the nearest mailbox under a gray sky that didn't care about drama. No explosive confrontation, no doorstep speech, just ink, truth, and silence. On the way home, I stopped by a cafe and got a black coffee. I didn't bring my laptop. I didn't check messages. I just sat at the window watching the world carry on. When I returned to my apartment, I lit a new candle, something pine-scented, clean. I left the door unlocked for a moment, let the cold air flow in, and then slowly closed it behind me. Inside, I was still. Not angry, not even triumphant. Just free. They needed a daughter when the bills piled up, when their messes got too big, when they needed a signature without questions. But when the party came, when the camera turned on, when the spotlight was passed, they handed it to the dog. That's not family. That's theater. And I was done being cast in a silent role. I stood by the window, mug warming my hands. The skyline of Austin blinked quietly. Somewhere, kids were laughing downstairs. A car started. Life continued. It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone in that house. I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to fight. I just had to step away. And by doing so, let them face what they built, without me. You don't have to burn the house down to leave it behind. You just have to stop holding it up. The heater in room 215 buzzed like it was dying. Carmela lay flat on the motel bed, staring at a brown water stain spreading across the ceiling tiles like a slow infection. Walter was fumbling with the TV remote, tapping it against his palm like that would magically bring the screen to life. It didn't. Max had claimed the foot of the bed, curled up with a loud sigh, snuggled into a towel that once served as a bath mat. His bowl sat next to the door, filled with crushed ice from the hallway machine. Their things, 2 duffel bags and a box taped shut with duct tape lined the base of the wall like silent witnesses to a life downsized. Neither of them spoke. They hadn't, really, since the letter arrived. Walter had read it first. He didn't tell Carmela for 2 hours. Just stood there by the mailbox, rereading the single sentence. The foundation held because of me. It crumbles without me. Signed, Matilda. Now, here they were, reduced to a borrowed room, plastic sheets, and a dog who never once asked questions. Carmela shifted her gaze toward the nightstand, where her phone blinked red. A voicemail. She hadn't opened it yet. Back in Austin, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand. The notification was new, but the number wasn't. My thumb hovered over it for a second, then I tapped play. Her voice came through, hushed, clipped by static. We didn't know how far you'd go. We thought you still cared. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just the same guilt-colored plea dressed up as confusion. I let the silence stretch after the recording ended. My thumb didn't move to delete it. Not yet. Some things are meant to be heard, not answered. I set the phone down, stood up, and moved to the kitchen. I poured cereal into a bowl. Not a plastic one, not chipped, not left from a hand-me-down set. A real ceramic bowl I bought for myself. I sat at the table, ate slowly, not because I was distracted, but because I finally had time to taste my own pace. After rinsing the dish, I opened the storage box labeled New Apartment, pulled out the last item I hadn't placed yet, a photo frame. Inside it was a picture of me standing alone at the top of a hiking trail, hair wild in the wind, arms out like wings. No one had taken it for me. I'd set a timer. No one had cropped it. No one else needed to be in it to give it meaning. I placed it on the bookshelf beside a plant I hadn't killed yet. It stood straight and small, just like me. Then I lit a candle. Lavender this time. I didn't think about Christmas, or the bowl, or Max. I just watched the wax melt slow and steady. The flame didn't flicker. They used to say I was the emotional one, the dramatic one, the one who made everything too big. But really, all I had ever done was stop being useful. Family, real family, isn't who shows up when they need a signature. It's who remembers you when you're not in the room. They never needed a daughter. They needed a failsafe. And when that failsafe pulled the plug, they didn't collapse because I walked away. They collapsed because they never learned to stand on their own. I don't regret sending the letter. I don't regret the silence. What I grieved wasn't the house or the holidays or the photo frames. It was the version of me that kept waiting for something they never intended to give. Acceptance. Belonging. Love without a receipt. I was never asking to be everything. Just something. Turns out, that was already too much. I blew out the candle before bed, climbed under the blanket, let the quiet hold me like it had hands. They were sleeping in a motel with cracks in the walls and rust in the sink. I was here, whole, peaceful, home. You can lose everything they called home and still come home to yourself. Looking back, I didn't walk away because I stopped loving them. I walked away because I finally started loving myself. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't leaving. It's realizing you were never really seen to begin with, and deciding that your worth no longer depends on someone else's inability to recognize it. Families don't always break in loud, dramatic ways. Often they just quietly let you go, long before you ever leave. But healing? Healing begins the moment you stop asking for a seat at someone else's table and start building one of your own. So, if you're watching this and you've ever felt like the forgotten one, the quiet one, the one who always kept the peace at your own expense, I want you to hear this. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. And you don't have to earn the love that should have been given freely. This was my story. But maybe, in some way, it's yours too. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from people who claim to love you, but only when it suited them? How did you find peace in that decision? Let me know in the comments. If this story moved you, even just a little, drop a 1 below or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't connect, I'd still love to hear why. Your voice matters here. And if you'd like to hear more real stories like this, stories that dig deep, hurt a little, but maybe heal something too, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I've got more to share. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply choose yourself.